Hey guys, I'm Raquel and welcome to my channel Out of the Past, where I share my love of classic movies. And today I have a book review, and the book in question is this one right here. It's A Wonderful Life, the official Bailey family cookbook. As you see in the cover there, it's red with gold trim. You've got Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed, and this is a cookbook, retro style. You see the retro style food photography here. A retro style, a cookbook inspired by the Frank Capra classic, It's a Wonderful Life, from 1946. So this book has, basically it takes the food scenes from the movie and also other scenes that maybe not food related, turn them into recipes or are inspired by some of the characters. And basically you have a bunch of amazing recipes and some crafts as well. So there are 7 sections in the book. Here's the contents. It's appetizers, sides, entrees, desserts, cocktails and drinks, and Christmas crafts. And then the last section is how to throw the perfect vintage Christmas dinner. And this tells you how to prepare, what to do a couple weeks ahead of time, you know, building a grocery list, planning out a menu, decorating, entertaining, all sorts of things. So that's pretty cool. I do not entertain very much, but I think it's kind of fun to look through that. So the sections I was most interested in were the recipes. I had a food blog back in the day. I'm kind of just your average home cook. I do like to modify things to what I have at home or my skill set. But otherwise, most of these recipes are pretty good for the average home cook. And not all of them have direct connections to the movies, but a lot of them do. So I'll share a few of them that are literally taken right from the movie. And the first one is a basic one, corn muffins. So there's a scene where Annie the maid comes out and is serving dinner to the Bailey family, and she brings out a basket of corn muffins, which Peter and George are seen eating. So that's quite basic, and I love a good corn muffin. And then you have one of my favorite connections to the movie, which is the phonograph fowl. And if you remember the honeymoon scene where basically George and Mary have spent all of their honeymoon funds because of the crisis that was happening at the bank. And so she's setting up a little kind of honeymoon at the old dilapidated house, which she's fixed up to a certain extent. And some of the things that she has going there is like a roaring fire and some music. She has a little cake, which they have a recipe in here for, like what it could have been. And one thing she has over the fire is like the spit with 2 chickens turning. And what's turning them is some sort of belt that's tied to the phonograph, and as the phonograph is playing, romantic music, it's also turning the chickens. So I love that they did like a phonograph fowl. You don't actually need a phonograph to make it, but so back to Annie, Annie the maid. She is making pies for Harry Bailey. And Harry is graduating from high school, and it's right before that big high school sequence, like the graduation sequence, where you see George and Mary dancing and they fall into the pool as the floor is opening up. That's a classic scene. But before then, he's collecting some pies to bring to the party. And you see him with a pie on his head, 2 pies on his hands, and that's the Annie's mixed berry pie, which I thought was quite clever. Now, in the beginning of the movie where you see Mary and George as young children, there's a sequence at the drugstore where Mary is kind of waffling on what she's going to order, and she decides she wants a scoop of chocolate ice cream. And George says, "Do you want coconuts on it?" And she said, "No, I don't want coconuts." And this is where you get kind of a sense of who George is. He wants to be a world traveler. He wants to be a rich man. He has these ambitions, and coconuts represent an exotic lands. Like, he's like, do you know where coconuts come from, right? He's just like so upset that Mary doesn't want that. And that also hints to what kind of lifestyles they both want to live, which kind of conflict with each other. So you got the chocolate ice cream and coconut, and they made a coconut fudge icebox cake, which I think is a very clever way to tie it into that quite cute and very important scene. And then there's lots of different ones. Like I had mentioned, the bank crisis that was happening. They used their honeymoon funds to be able to give the bank customers some money just to hold them over during this crisis. And when the doors close, they have $2 left, a mama and a papa dollar is what George calls them. And there's a cocktail inspired by that, the Mama and Papa Dollar. I thought that was quite clever. And some of the references are maybe a little more obscure. There's a scene where George is over Mary's house, and that's when they have like their big romantic moment. And she's asking him about Harry's new wife. And, oh, do you not like her? And he's like, she's a peach. So there's she's a peach cocktail. The cocktails and the desserts in this book are actually, to me, the most fun. So I really like the retro style photographs. And if you're familiar with cookbooks from the 50s and 60s, maybe not so much the ones that have a lot of Jell-O molds, but nicer ones, you know. We'll have spreads like this. I'll show a close-up here of this one right here, which is Clarence's angel food cake. I really like the setup and how it's photographed and styled. Each recipe comes with a little introduction that kind of tells you what how it connects to the movie. And just a quick note too, that there's a couple Italian recipes here inspired by, you know, the lovable character Mr. Martini, who kind of exemplifies George Bailey's benevolence. So when he is able to afford his first real home for him and his family, Mary blesses the house with like salt and bread, and the line is bread that this house may never know hunger. So there's a home blessing salad, which is an Italian panzanella salad, which includes bread as like one of the main ingredients. So I thought that was really clever. So last night I made a 3-course meal and a cocktail inspired by this book. So I thought I'd just share exactly what I made and what I thought of it. So the first course was a wedge salad, and a wedge salad or a classic like Caesar salad were really common salads you would go get at a restaurant as part of your first course, especially during the mid-20th century. So I kind of think of like scenes from Mad Men when they're ordering wedge salads, or they're ordering a Caesar salad made tableside. So when I think of like 20th century elegance, I think of these kinds of salads. It's also the only time you can get me to eat iceberg lettuce, because I'm not a fan. But for some reason, smothered in a buttermilk blue cheese dressing and with bacon on top, it's actually quite delicious. So with this one, just a 1/4 wedge of iceberg lettuce. It comes with a recipe for blue cheese dressing, which is really good. It calls for Roquefort, but I put Gorgonzola because I'm not a Roquefort fan. Made the bacon, chopped up some cherry tomatoes, and this was a really, really great first course. And the connection here is that in the scene where Annie is serving the corn muffins and they're having dinner, Peter and George Bailey are served a little plate of iceberg lettuce salad. You don't really see what's on top, but you can see the lettuce. So the thought is it could be a nice little wedge salad. Now for the entree, this one doesn't have too much of a connection to the movie, but it is basically inspired by Mary Bailey herself. The thought is she is the ultimate provider for her family. She puts a lot of thought into renovating the home so it's hospitable for them and their 4 children. She's a wonderful provider. She's a great support. So basically the thought is she's always trying to do something for others. She's benevolent in a different way than George Bailey. So the thought process here is that her Dutch oven's always going with some delicious food. And this recipe is for oven-braised corned beef with mustard sauce. Now I had to do some modifications because I actually can't find any corned beef outside of March, essentially. You'll find it in the stores here for St. Patrick's Day, but not really any other time of year. But I made some modifications. I got a regular beef brisket. I seasoned it well. I seared it on both sides. I did there's a crust of like seasonings. Basically, it's different types of seeds like mustard seed, coriander seeds, fennel seeds. There's a whole mix, and I put it in a mortar and pestle, and I ground it up, and I created a little crust on the top, braised in the oven for a few hours. It was really good. This recipe calls for carrots, potatoes, and onions to be cooked along with it, but I swapped that out for just carrots, parsnips, and Brussels sprouts to give it a little green, and I just really like that combination of vegetables. And this also had a mustard sauce, which I basically reduced the sour cream so that the mustard and the horseradish in the sauce really popped, and it did, and it was absolutely delicious. Definitely will be making this again. Would love to try it with corned beef, but I was actually totally happy with a regular brisket. Now for the dessert, I was really excited to make these Meltaway moon cookies. Now the movie reference here is the scene where George and Mary are coming he's escorting her home from the graduation party, and they're singing, by the light of the moon. He offers to give her the moon, and she's like, what would I do with it? And he says like the moon would dissolve, and she would shoot moonbeams, out of her hair tips. Like it's quite interesting. But the whole idea of the moon dissolving is the inspiration from these cookies, like Meltaway moon cookies. They look like little moons, and they dissolve in your mouth. They're crumbly, buttery cookies with chopped pecans inside and rolled in powdered sugar. I recommend making these really small so you can just pop one in your mouth, because if you bite into it, instead of just eating the whole thing at once, it will be an explosion of powdered sugar and crumbs. It'll make a huge mess. So make them small. But these were absolutely delicious. I really had a fun time making these. I made them with dinner, but I honestly think it would make for a better breakfast cookie to have with tea or coffee. And you can see, I think this is, up here, this is coffee, but it could be tea with milk. And then for the cocktail, I was particularly excited to make this. However, I had a really hard time with the ingredients, and it ended up being very expensive. Got Zuzu's Petals. Now, of course, if you know the movie, you know the reference here. Zuzu is the youngest daughter, and she had come home sick from school, and she has a little rose, and it's losing its petals. And she really wants her dad to restore the petals to the flower, and he puts the petals in his pocket. Later on, when he meets Clarence, the angel in training, Clarence basically sets it up so that there's the intra-parallel universe where George sees what life would be like without him in it. And one of the first things that happens that he realizes that something's kind of off, even though Clarence clearly told him what was going on, is the fact that he can't find the petals in his pocket. So I thought this was kind of a fun cocktail to make. It basically is a champagne cocktail with Cointreau, rose syrup, and a little orange peel twist to it. I couldn't find the rose syrup, so what I did was I did a little combination of red grenadine and some rose water. So to give it a little bit of that red color, to make the drink a little pink, and also a little sweetness because it would have been like a sugary syrup, and rose water to give that rose flavor. And then it had Cointreau, which actually I had to buy a whole bottle of it because I didn't have any at home. And my local liquor store didn't have any like smaller bottles. I had to get like a good size one. So I'm looking for more Cointreau recipes. And then I got the smallest bottle of champagne I could find. And I wanted champagne and not Prosecco or another sparkling one. I really want to try champagne. And it was great. I had enough to make 4 cocktails. So like one for each of us, one for me and my husband, and a refill after. And it was pretty good. I would probably go a lot less if I had made it again with the grenadine and the rose water. I would have upped the rose water and reduced the grenadine because it was a little sweet, and I don't really like my cocktails to be too sweet. I try to kind of go back on that. So I would have added maybe a little more of the Cointreau and a little less of the sweetener. So that was what I made, and it was quite an amazing dinner. It was a lot of work, but we had a lot of fun enjoying it and then watching the movie, finding all the food references. It was really great. So that's It's a Wonderful Life, the official Bailey Family Cookbook. This is published by Inside Editions, and it is, I would say this would be perfect for fans of the movie, fans of vintage cooking, anyone who loves to cook and you're just like an average amateur home cook. This will be really great to have. If you're a collector of this era, or of maybe you're a big fan of the movie and like to collect things for the movie, this is a must-have. But I think you have to be interested in cooking and food in order to enjoy this book. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend watching the movie after you kind of browse the recipes and trying out some recipes yourself. I have some links down below on where you can find this book, and I hope you liked my review, and I wish you all a happy holiday season. Thank you for watching. Bye.